This episode of iFanboy is brought to you by GoDaddy and GameFly. Today at iFanboy, Conor goes to a dark place with the Man in Black, Josh is teaching how to tell stories, and Ron's taking a look at his original art collection. All this and more, you're watching iFanboy.
iFanboy, the video podcast from the comic book discussion website iFanboy.com. My name is Conor Kilpatrick, and late last year in 2009, there was a graphic novel that came out that I was really excited for. I saw it on the list, and I was really psyched to buy it. I finally did late in the year after it came out, and I read it right before the end of the year, and it's Johnny Cash, I See a Darkness. And you can't think of a graphic novel probably more tailor-made to me and probably Josh and Ron as well. It's a big, thick, original graphic novel about Johnny Cash. We are all big fans of Johnny Cash's music. And what better thing for us? We love indie graphic novels, we love OGNs, we love Johnny Cash, here we go. And this is from writer-artist Reinhard Kleist, published by Abrams Comics Arts New York. So it came out of nowhere. It's not really a normal comic publisher you hear about a lot. It's not like it was hyped for a while, all of a sudden it just came out. And so those are those great surprises that you often find in comics. I read it, and I was a little disappointed. First of all, I don't know a lot about Johnny Cash's history. I only know I like his music. I don't really delve into his life. I saw the movie Walk the Line. That's all I have from his life. And the story in this book, which is basically the story of his life, just like the movie, it parallels the movie, but there are some distinct differences, and that threw me off simply because the only frame of reference I had was the movie, whether it's right or not. It doesn't matter. That's all I had to go on. For instance, in the book, Johnny Cash's father is quite sympathetic, where in the movie he's quite unsympathetic, and I don't know which is true. And at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter. I know it took me out of the story because all I had to go on was Johnny Cash's father was a bastard from the movie. There's two ways to look at this book, the art and the writing. The art is spectacular. I loved how this book looked. He had this really gritty style. It was a lot of lines, and colored with grayscale. He did a great job of making the characters look. There's a lot of historically famous characters in here. He made them look like the people without making it look like he was drawn from a photo, which he may have been, but it didn't really. His style was one that you couldn't really tell that if he was or wasn't, and in that sense, it really worked. That's the thing when you're drawing a graphic novel based on real people, the art's always going to be in question because you don't want it to look too stiff, but you also want it to look enough like the people that you're portraying, so that people aren't taken out of the story. Now, my favorite thing about the art in this is actually when Johnny Cash plays his songs. They don't really have him play and then show a bunch of dialogue balloons with the lyrics. What they do is they do artistic interpretations of the songs themselves. In fact, it opens up with an artistic interpretation of Folsom Prison Blues. And my favorite page when he performs Big River, and all of a sudden he's on stage with this huge river vista behind him. And that theme would repeat itself throughout the book, where he would play a song and you'd see the song behind him, and instead of the lyrics on the page, which it's fine to read, but it doesn't really capture the music. I think the art captures the feeling of music much more than just reading the lyrics would. And that was my favorite thing about this book. I actually, as soon as I read it, I actually had to tell people, you had to see these segments in this book because they're so fantastic. Now that gets to the point where this book was disappointing, and it was disappointing in that, first of all, the writer-artist Reinhard Kleist is German, and he won the Max and Moritz Award and the Sondermann Award for Best Graphic Novel and Best National Production. I assume those are both German awards because he's a German cartoonist or comic author. And this book is translated from German. And as a result, a lot of the dialogue is stiff, and a lot of it reads very simply. And I gotta believe that's from translation and not from the writing itself, because it comes off slightly in parts like a children's novel when it's clearly not, because there's a lot of drugs and sex and things like that. I think that's what happens when you translate German to English sometimes. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but that's what I felt like when I was reading it, that this was not a bad translation, but not a very soulful translation. Sometimes in translation you have to embellish because one language doesn't translate directly into another language, and sometimes you lose the meaning in the words when you just go straight through. So that was the only thing that hurt it, was that some of the dialogue was really clunky and really stiff and really simplistic. But overall I enjoyed it. I'd probably, if there was a 5-star scale, I'd probably give it 3.5 stars. Maybe even 4 for bumping up for the art. The art was a 5, and the story was like a 2.5, 3 stars simply because of the stilted dialogue. But overall, I'm glad I read it and bought it. I like Johnny Cash a lot. If you're a big fan of Johnny Cash, you'll probably really enjoy this. If nothing else for the art, it's a beautifully looking book, and the songs are really represented really well. And it's an interesting story, whether you know it or not, whether you've seen the movie or not, whether you have any frame of reference. Johnny Cash's life is a very interesting one, and not only that, but it goes all the way to the end of his life, to his final recordings, and that's really interesting too, which is an area that wasn't in the movie. So you get to see him recording with Rick Rubin in a shack in the middle of nowhere, and it's just a really nice chronicle. It's a big, thick book. You really get a lot for your money. I think I bought this for like $8 or $9 on Amazon. They were having a sale at the end of the year, and this was like the biggest value for my dollar I've ever gotten. So that's Johnny Cash, I See a Darkness. You can check that out if you want to. Coming up next, Josh has got something for you, and I don't know what it is because honestly, sometimes when he talks, I just go.
A big thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring this episode of iFanboy. Web hosting from GoDaddy.com includes 99.9% uptime, 24/7 support, and free access to Hosting Connection, the place to install over 33 applications sure to help you get the most from your hosting plan and website. We've got new promo codes. If you use promo code FAN8, you get 10% off any order. Go to revision3.com/GoDaddy and click on iFanboy to get all the new promo codes and use GoDaddy for all your internet hosting needs and domain name registrations. Thanks again to GoDaddy for sponsoring this episode.
Hey, I'm Josh Flanagan, and here we are in the middle of the show. This is the middle section that we do. I want to talk to you about storytelling today. Storytelling is one of those things that when people talk about good comic books and they're trying to sound erudite, like I do sometimes, try to, not do, but you know, I mean, who am I kidding? I'm very good at it. No. When you're talking about a review of a comic or what makes a comic successful or the mechanics of comic books, you hear people a lot of time talk about storytelling. And they'll say, oh, well, Will Eisner's the master of storytelling. And the storytelling was very good. It was bad storytelling. I was completely lost. And so on and so forth. But we don't get a lot of a chance to talk about what that is or give good examples of it. And I thought that I would go through a few of them. One of the things you can do is you can read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. We did a whole show about that, but really it's more important to go read the book. And in that, he explains sort of what storytelling is and what works and how you show motion from panel to panel. But then there are other parts that go along with it, such as pacing and point of view, so you're not always looking at the same thing. And just, it's sort of a bunch of intangible things that all work together to make a successful page and have you go through it and have your eye follow the panels and do the things and notice the things they're supposed to and tell the story in an effective way. First, I have some examples. First thing I have here is an issue of Hellboy. This is Hellboy the Wild Hunt number 5, written by Mike Mignola, who is a master storyteller, but drawn by Duncan Fagredo, who is certainly no slouch. One of the reasons I picked this is that the BPRD and the Hellboy books, they all have a certain aesthetic with them, and one of the things they do really good is show fighting, showing action, which is what a lot of comic book fans like, obviously. So I grabbed a page here of Hellboy fighting a giant metal robot monster, which is something he does very well. And if you just look and him fighting the monster, and you see the different kinds of close-ups. You start this wide and sort of this wide panel. It's not very tall, and it's just focusing on Hellboy's giant arm, and then in the foreground, and then in the background, you can see most of the monster. And then there's the big wide shot of him hitting him, and there's not a lot of words on this, so they're not using the words to tell the story. They're showing the story, and what you really got to look for in these is how easily you can tell what happens from one action to the next. Now, they're not showing you the moment between when Hellboy is standing there to the moment to when he punches him. In fact, they're showing you after the moment that he punches him. And so you are filling in the middle of that in your head. And then he picks up some great big thing of rock. Now, you didn't have to see where he took it from. You didn't have to see him looking for it. They chose that the reader would be able to understand that if you picked something up, that meant that there was something laying around. And then, Hellboy, just at the moment of pressing the big brick into the monster's face. And if you just look at that, it's 5 panels, and it shows basically a whole fight sequence that happens, and it does it really effectively. And if you were going through it with your eyes, you wouldn't think about any of those things. It just is, but the layout, everything works really well. That last panel is nice and big, that has an air of finality to it. If that had been a little tiny panel in the corner, then it's a whole other ballgame. So there's a good example. Another one I wanted to grab here was The Spirit. This is Darwin Cook, who I think is probably as good as any cartoonist working right now at this. And a really good reason to just talk about him doing storytelling is because one thing he does is he's not very detailed. He's not rendering everything. He's using basic shapes. He's using really basic ideas in how to communicate what he's doing with the story. So again, this is another action scene. The Spirit is fighting, I don't even know this guy, but he's got a saw. He's fighting a dude with a saw. And so you start and you have this big wide shot, and it's canted a little bit to sort of indicate action. I think when you see that, you think that things are kind of askew and kind of strange. And these are all clues as to how you're supposed to feel, what the mood is supposed to be like as you're doing it. You have the close-up on Denny as the saw goes past him, and then, you know, if you just look at the things that come after it, they're detail shots. It's just a fist, and there's a bunch of shadows with a sound effect. There's not a lot of detail going on here, but again, you're filling it in. And then you see the saw bouncing. It's all on its own. There's nothing else going on, so you know he's been disarmed. And then, you know, the jump. It's just, they're all very simple, but it works really well. And I know that some people will be looking at these pages and be like, well, yeah, of course that's how it works. But one of the things about this is that it happens in a way that you don't have to think about it. And the best guys do that in that way. And even if you look at these 3 panels on the bottom indicating sort of what's going on outside, they're just done so elegantly and so simply. She parachutes in, there's just this little body, there's not really much information there, a silhouetted shot of her landing, and then a shot from behind her head. And just these little things just do it so well. And what he does really well is pick what to show you and how to move you through. Now there's, you know, you could take the middle one out and maybe you don't see her land, but that has a different feel, it has a different pace, and you can think about stuff like that. So that's one example. A different kind of example altogether is from Scalp number 30. iFanboy fans will recognize this as the book that had pick of the week that Blackest Night number 1 came out, the most contentious pick of the week ever, but I'm going to share with you a little bit about why I picked it. Right here on the very first page. And this one is really more about tone than it is about conveying action, which is a different kind of storytelling. And, you know, it just shows the old lady and the guy sitting here on this porch with a dog. Nobody really moves very much. There's just this color and this stillness to everything. You know, she's smoking a pipe. He's sort of sitting there hunched over, you know, on the side of the steps. You see her gnarled hand, and then the close-up on her eyes. And this is, you're not seeing, she picks up the pipe, she takes out the lighter, she lights the thing, they talk like that. This is all to convey mood. Now, this is a different kind of storytelling, but, you know, I don't need to know what the words say on this to know what the mood is and what the feeling is, because it's all coming through in the pictures, and that's one of the things that I really liked about this issue and this series in general. But that's just a different example of how you can use a page to do something, and that takes the action and slows everything way, way down. There are other parts later in the issue where there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's shooting and running, but that starts everything off at a certain pace, and it chooses what that's going to be. One more I'm going to give you is this last issue of Northlanders. And the reason that I picked this out is because this has actually got an example that I thought was sort of a rough example of storytelling. Near the end, you've got these 2 characters, and they got into a fight, and the one guy, in the first panel on this page, the one guy falls down. And now what we see after this is it's all sort of in shadow, it's not done with a lot of detail, and the color is very muted and sort of bleak. This guy picks up the other guy and carries him through the middle of this town. Then you see him in sort of an alley, and it's not really clear that he's carrying the other person. And the reason that I bring this up is because now that I've looked at it 5 or 6 times, I can tell what's going on, but the very first time that I went through it, I didn't know what was happening in this 6th panel here, where he throws somebody down, and there's a big whomp sound effect, but it looked like somebody was falling through between these 2 roofs, and I just wasn't clear about what was happening, and only after a while did I figure out what it was. And that, to me, is the problem with this page. There's no words, so you're doing it all through the actions, and it's kind of in shadow, and it was difficult for me to follow. And this was, and I was reading this, I thought, this probably could have been done better. Now, this is by Leandro Fernandez. This is an artist I actually really, really like in Northlanders, so I thought I would show you, just to make up for it, another page that I thought was a very good storytelling page about this fight where these guys in the woods get attacked by a bunch of wolves. And if you see how this fight goes along, they don't, again, show you a lot of the details that happen in it, but sort of the little cuts, the little bits, and that gets you through the fight. And also, it's composed very artistically. It's composed very well, and so there's all sorts of different angles, and the light is all over the place, and you see some things in silhouette, and some things are close-ups, and it conveys a lot of motion and movement and action and excitement in a very different way than that other page did, and I really like that page too. Finally, last thing I got to show you is that from this last pick of the week, Detective Comics number 861. This is by Jock. Jock is probably one of my favorite artists up there, definitely in my top 5. And this first page of this issue was really, I thought, something special, and I didn't see a lot of this the first time through. So take a look at this first panel. It's got these 3 guys standing outside. They're near a car. That looks fine and cool. And if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, there's that shadow that's supposed to be Batman. I did not see that until I came back through. You go to the next panel, and the focus on this is on these two characters talking to each other, but then over in the background on the left, you see an arm yanking that guy out of the panel. Nothing's really shown very clearly, and you know where you're supposed to look. And then, Batman takes the other guy out of the scene there, and basically this whole menace is created by Batman. He's in every single panel, but you don't actually see him once. You kind of see his silhouette in that one, and that's about it. And I just really liked how that was done. It indicates quietness. It indicates this just sort of stillness that's being very, very silently disrupted. And this is a really good one. And this is one of the things that I liked about Jock a lot. But I thought the thing that made me the most excited about this page was I didn't see Batman until I went back through. But it wasn't because I was confused. It's because he was hiding. And I thought it was a really nice way to do it. So those are a few examples of what I think are really good storytelling, the kind of stuff that I look for, the kind of stuff that doesn't get me confused when I read a page, that moves me through it really well and does it in a simple way, because sometimes it's not always about being fancy. And there is my clinic on storytelling.
GameFly is the largest online video game rental service and offers you a choice of over 7,000 new and classic titles across all consoles and handhelds. With plans starting at $15.95 a month, GameFly members can rent 1 to 4 games at a time and keep them for as long as they like. There are no late fees, no due dates, and shipping is always free. When you're done playing, send the game back to GameFly and they'll send you the next available game on your list. If you really like the game you're playing, simply keep it on the GameFly website and the game is yours at a discounted price. GameFly will even mail you the case and the manuals free of charge. iFanboy fans can get a 2 free week trial when they go to gamefly.com/iFanboy. Some restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hey, I'm Ron Richards, and for this segment, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about original art. One of the great things about comic books, if you're a fan of the comic books that you read, they start with an artist. An artist sits in front of a board, usually a piece of Bristol board, with pen and ink, some blue pencils and things like that, and draws the page of art that begins the comic book. When that page of art is drawn, it is then normally scanned into a computer and then sent off to a inker or to a colorist or to whomever, and the process goes, and then we eventually get our comic book. But a great source of income and a great another area of kind of collecting within the comic book hobby is getting that original art. Nearly every page that exists in a comic book exists in the real world somewhere, and a lot of artists have made a lot of money on the side by selling their art. You can go online and there's a bunch of original art dealers where popular artists that you may be fans of give their art to these dealers, and you can buy them online. You can also buy them at conventions. A lot of the art dealers go to the shows, they bring books and books of original art and can sell you pages there, or some artists actually bring their pages with them, and if you go find their tables in Artist Alley or wherever, you can buy art directly from them. So in 2009, I kind of took a step forward and bought a bunch of original art that I'm really proud of. Original art can be a little expensive, anywhere from $100 to $300 to $500. So I try, it's really hard not to spend too much money to get really sucked into it. So I was really kind of discerning, and almost nearly every con I go to, I said, okay, I'm gonna buy one page. I just want to pick up one page so I can remember that convention as well as the artist I liked. So I want to share some of the pages I got in 2009 with you. So this first one here is Mitch Breitweiser is the artist. I picked this up at the New York Comic Con in 2009, so way back in February, I think it was. And this is a page from the Uncanny X-Men annual that he worked on that had just come out. Some of the things that make a page more expensive is when you see full characters in their costumes. Those are the kind of pages that fetch a lot of money. And this particular page, I was drawn to it because not only does it look beautiful, because I love Mitch Breitweiser's style, but it's got Dr. Doom, Namor, and Emma Frost all on the page, full costumes. You can see them in clear as day. They don't have their back turned or anything like that. And it just looks really great. I love Mitch's kind of his style with his pen strokes, and you can see the detail in Emma's hair and in Namor's hair, as well as in the background. Just how this page then gets translated into the final issue and looks as great as it does. So that was the first kind of page I picked up. When I went to the Windy City Comic Con in Chicago in the fall of 2009, I stopped by Jeff Lemire's table. And for those of you who watch iFanboy know that we're big fans of Jeff Lemire. And in the summer 2009, his graphic novel from Vertigo, The Nobody, came out, and Jeff had pages with him there. So I said, Jeff's an up-and-coming talent. I think this is going to be a great investment. So I picked up a page of art from The Nobody. This was really interesting because Jeff's style is totally unique. He's like no other artist I've ever seen before, and I really wanted to see how he lays out a page and how he works with it. And it was interesting to see so much blue line pencil work done that then he inked over elaborate to see as the figures come together and as the backgrounds come together. You notice that Jeff is unique in that not every comic artist draws in the word balloons, but Jeff does. He controls the panel so much that he drew in the word balloons and then the letters were digitally matted in later on. So really interesting to see this page from the Nobody. I love this page. It looks beautiful and really captures the main character, the Invisible Man, from the Nobody. So those of you who do watch iFanboy or listen to our audio show, you know that I'm a huge fan of Jamie McKelvie's work. He's the artist on PHONOGRAM. I love the first series, I love the second series, and I've been lucky enough to talk to Jamie. And when he finishes an issue of PHONOGRAM, I get it at the comic book store, flip through it, and then I've said, okay, I want to buy these pages. So I've bought a total of about 8 pages of PHONOGRAM this past year. Got a little crazy, but I wanted to show you 2 of my favorite ones that I picked up from PHONOGRAM number 6. This is actually the last page of the issue where the girl jumps out of the car and runs off. And the reason why I bought this, not only because I love Jamie's art, but because the actual text in the issue, the narration box, is a lyric from a Smiths song. And I'm a big fan of the Smiths. And so this page had a little bit of sentimental value for me in that regard. Besides, it's just beautiful to see the facial expression on the character Lloyd at the top, as well as the great landscape that Jamie drew in the bottom panel. Really great. Another page I picked up from PHONOGRAM, very simple, just a 6-panel grid of the DJ and Silent Girl as they're dancing to Atomic by Blondie. This was just one of my favorite pages in the entire series, so I just had to have it. So I was lucky enough that it was available. Jamie signed it for me, and now it sits in my collection. And the last page I wanted to show you guys was one hopefully you've seen before. It came out a long time ago in 2008, Green Arrow, Black Canary number 13, and it was drawn by Mike Norton. And there's a reason why I wanted to buy this page. Here in this page you see it's a close-up of a kiss between Speedy, Green Arrow's young ward, and her new boyfriend, the roguish kind of guy, I forget his character's name, and it happens at a party. And if you look in closely in the back corner at the bottom of the party, you see 3 very handsome guys hanging out at the party. So because of that, I figured I should own this page. So I talked to Mike Norton and the inker Wayne Fosher, and they were kind enough to sell it to me. And so now this page that was printed in Green Arrow Black Canary with me, Josh, and Conor in it is now in the iFanboy headquarters offices, framed up on a wall. We're going to cherish it forever. So yeah, these are just some of my favorite pieces of original art. The great thing about original art is that it's only I have it. It was drawn, it was reprinted, but now the original piece is going to sit in my house until either I sell it, which I never probably will sell it because I really do treasure this stuff. So if you're into original art, go to iFanboy.com. There will be some links to where you can buy original art, some great dealers like Cadence and Albert Moy and Splash Page Art. Great sites where you can buy art from some of your favorite artists. And if you have any questions about this episode or about original art or anything, the stuff that Josh or Conor talked about, you can shoot us an email at contact@ifanboy.com, or you can go to the website at ifanboy.com or revision3.com/ifanboy, check out previous episodes, or you can call our voicemail line at 1-888-FANBOYS. It's 1-888-326-2697. And we'll see you next week.
Three, two. Eesh. And I'm talking to myself because there's no one here.